Sell me this fucking pen right here. You can sell anything. Sell that. Go ahead. That single sentence is a test. It's a provocation. It's a moment where everything separates the talkers from the closers. In the world, Jordan Belfort dominated. That question was never about the pen. It was about control, persuasion, and the ability to make someone believe in value where none existed. And that's exactly where the real story of the Wolf of Wall Street begins, not with parties or champagne, but with a lesson in human behavior. People buy stories long before they buy products. Most viewers remember the movie for excess, wild parties, yachts, and a man who seemed untouchable. But if you strip away the spectacle, the core of the Stratton Oakmont empire is a machine built on sales, psychology, and social engineering. Belfort didn't just teach people to sell, he taught people to rewrite reality. He taught them to make the unfamiliar feel inevitable. He taught them to turn ordinary, worthless stock into a perceived ticket to wealth. And that's the part the movie soft, dramatized, or skipped altogether. The reality was more systematic, more cold-blooded, and far more damaging than Hollywood's version. Stratton Oakmont functioned like a factory. It recruited, trained, monitored, and monetized human beings with procedural efficiency. New hires were not adopted into a chaotic culture. They were processed, indoctrinated, and optimized for extraction. The scripts they used were props of control. Every objection had a counterscript. Every hesitation had a psychological lever. Their job was not to educate investors. It was to get money in the door. The profanity and drugs were performance. The point was the engine behind the curtain. The process of turning fear and desire into immediate action. Cold calls were the assembly line. The product was a promise. The delivery was a lie packaged as a path to legitimacy. That's how millions were taken slowly, methodically, and with the complicity of people who simply wanted to believe a better life was possible. What the film cuts around is the precision. For every brazen scene of excess, there were spreadsheets, shell companies, offshore accounts, and people who specialized in obfuscation. Stratton Oakmont was not a barn-raising of con artists. It was a corporate structure with departments, sales, accounts, laundering, PR, legal damage control. Those departments collaborated to ensure funds moved where they needed to move and reputations were reframed when necessary. The image of a single charismatic leader is convenient for narrative. But behind that leader was an infrastructure of complicity and calculation. One of the most insidious parts of Belfort's operation was the way it targeted a demographic rarely featured in cinematic retellings: middle-class investors, who had limited access to financial literacy. These were not whales or institutional players. They were school teachers, small business owners, retirees, people with modest means who were told they were being offered insider opportunities. They trusted brokers who sounded confident, who used industry jargon, who leveraged social proof, testimonials, fake trading screenshots, staged withdrawals. The playing field was skewed by design. And then there is the matter of regulatory capture and delay. The movie compresses investigations and consequences into neat arcs. Life is rarely so tidy. In reality, the systems meant to catch such schemes took years to respond. Auditors tangled with smoke and mirrors. Legal processes lagged behind. By the time the fractures appeared publicly, the money had evaporated into a labyrinth of accounts and shell entities. Victims were left with legal processes that often yielded little, while public fascination moved on to the next scandal. Another truth the film softens: the transformation of crime into spectacle. Belfort became a celebrity of sorts, book deals, media interviews, and later, the rebranding into a sales guru. The narrative was flipped. The man at the center of a multi-year fraud became a lesson in personal reinvention, a comeback story for those who wanted to believe in redemption. The victims, however, rarely receive the same cinematic resurrection. But the most dangerous legacy of Stratton Oakmont is not that it happened. It's that its tactics were modular. With each regulatory or technological advance, the core psychology, scarcity, authority, social proof, urgency, was repackaged and reused. Where once cold calls and boiler rooms were the only vectors, the same blueprint found new carriers. email campaigns, influencer endorsements, pump-and-dump crypto projects, AI-generated illusions of legitimacy. The tools evolved. The script remained the same. Consider the mechanics. Create a perceived advantage, signal authority, manufacture scarcity, and pressure for immediate action. Add a feedback loop that shows small, believable wins to build trust, then scale the ask. That's not sophistication. It's behavioral economics weaponized for extraction. And because it preys on human desire for quick gain, it often avoids immediate rational scrutiny. The movie's emphasis on charisma obscures a more unsettling point. Charisma is a feature, not a bug. Belfort's personal magnetism, the charm that earns attention and trust, worked best when combined with operational rigor. He wasn't merely a rogue salesperson. He was a leader of an apparatus that turned persuasion into profit at scale. In the quieter rooms where strategy replaced spectacle, the scheme thrived. But how exactly did Stratton Oakmont operationalize this? First, it mined social networks, not digital ones in the modern sense, but socioeconomic networks. They sought people who trusted intermediaries, small investors who relied on brokers for financial decisions. They then introduced frictionless paths to investment. Simple sign-up, immediate demo wins, a user interface that displayed gains. The interface was intentionally friendly. Complexity was outsourced to the customer, esse imagination. When combined with assertive sales tactics, it became a potent engine. Second, they controlled narrative points, newsletters, press, placements, stage testimonials. Third, they coordinated exits, the dump phase, where insiders quietly sold while retail investors still believed the rally would continue. What the film does portray well is the human cost of that culture, but in a stylized way. The truth is harsher. People lost homes, relationships, and trust. Some sought legal recourse, but legal systems are cumbersome, and restitution rarely matched the losses. Communities of victims formed in the aftermath, not for spectacle, but as mutual aid groups trying to recover pieces of plans ruined by promises of quick fortune. We must also address laundering, the shadow choreography of modern fraud. Stratton, Oakmont, and similar operations had channels to disguise financial flows. Money was converted into different forms, moved through jurisdictions with looser regulations, laundered through legitimate-sounding business activities. These mechanisms complicate enforcement, and they create plausible deniability for those higher up the chain. It's easy to criminalize the visible excess. The quieter route of money across borders is where the real damage often settles. Another dimension worth unpacking is the role of cultural mythology in these schemes. The 1990s were an era of emerging wealth narratives. Tech bubbles, celebrity financiers, and media that glamorized rapid success. That culture created fertile ground for scams dressed as opportunity. Belfort and his cohort were not inventing demand. They were amplifying it. They offered narratives people wanted to hear, the chance to be part of something exclusive, the promise that daring moves yield outsized rewards. It's a dynamic that persists today in new forms. Fast forward to 2025. The landscape has shifted, but not the vulnerabilities. Where Belfort relied on phone lines and human orchestration, modern fraudsters deploy bots, targeted social campaigns, influencer marketing, and even AI-generated personas. The blueprint is identical. Create trust, manufacture momentum, extract value. Only the delivery mechanisms have modernized. The moral is simple and chilling. New tech does not immunize the public against old human biases. So what do we do with this knowledge? First, recognizing that charisma or polish is not credibility. Second, demanding transparency, verifiable documentation, auditor access, and rigorous regulatory oversight for investment channels. Third, educating the public to recognize the anatomy of a scam, pressure for immediacy, insistence on secrecy, good stories with poor proof, and requests for irreversible asset transfers like crypto. Finally, the story of Belfort and Stratton Oakmont is valuable not because it is shocking, many frauds are shocking, but because it is instructive. It teaches us how social engineering scales when combined with organizational discipline. It reveals that financial ecosystems can be gamed by those who understand both people and process. And it warns us that glamour can be used to obscure harm. This is not just a historical excavation. It's a manual for vigilance. Because as much as we dissect Belfort's misdemeanors and excesses, the more pressing lesson is preventative. Build systems that demand proof over polish, regulation that outpaces novelty, and a public that values skepticism over spectacle. If you want more deep investigations into the systems that enable fraud and practical guides on how to avoid becoming a victim, subscribe to the channel. We will continue to deconstruct the mechanics, expose the patterns, and help you see the structures that hide in plain sight. The Wolf of Wall Street wasn't that lone predator. It was a case study in organized social engineering. Learn it well, because the next marquee scandal will borrow from the same playbook. Stay skeptical, stay informed, and never let a flashy story replace hard evidence.